some cards were handed out. You're supposed to put the most outrageous thing a boss ever asked you to do. Leave it anonymous. There will be a competition at the end with a couple distinguished judges to narrow it down to the 4 most outrageous things ever done. I can tell you, I'll give you some examples from the book, which is unbelievable. Some of my favorites were a boss giving his urine sample to his assistant to bring it to the lab. And then another boss gave a stool sample to his assistant to bring to the lab. There's an amazing amount of things. So this was something that 9 to 5 did for years, and we will do here. But to as well, I think we're getting pens, so you could complete your cards, introducing Ellen Cassedy on working 9 to 5, a women's movement, a labor union, and the iconic movie is the CSU president, Alexa McPherson, who's the president of the CSU. I do have to say, if you don't have a book, go get one. It is really beautifully written, really outrageous, really fun, really moving. Any of you who've ever organized anything or worked, which I assume is all of you, will see yourself in this. Very recommended. So at this time, I will introduce Alexa, who I bargained with, and we had our share of fun times doing that as well.
Thank you for having me. I'm Alexa McPherson, the president of the Classified Staff Union, and I'm pleased to welcome Ellen to this event. So Ellen Cassedy was a founder of the 9 to 5 organization of women office workers that began here in Boston some 50 years ago. So starting out in Boston in about 1973, before I was even born, the women of the 9 to 5 Foundation built a nationwide feminist movement that united people of all diverse races, classes, and ages across America. These pillars of women and of the workplace took on the corporate titans. They leafleted, they filed lawsuits, they started a women-led union, and they successfully ended up winning millions of dollars in back pay, and probably more importantly, helped to make sexual harassment and pregnancy discrimination illegal in the workforce. These women rose up together to win these rights and respect at the office, and they helped transform the workplace throughout America. In her newest book, Working 9 to 5, A Woman's Movement, a Labor Union in the Iconic Movie, Ellen describes her own first-person account of this incredible movement and journey. Her book has a foreword by Jane Fonda. And within the book, Liz Schuler, the president of the AFL-CIO, calls the book, quote, a must read for any activist or reader in search of inspiration, end quote. Historian Lane Wyndham calls it, quote, exactly the right book at the right time, end quote. Ellen is a former columnist for the Philadelphia Daily News, where she wrote a column on work from the worker's point of view. You should probably still be writing that. She was a speechwriter in the Clinton administration and is an award-winning author of several books. She currently lives in New York City, and I'm pleased to welcome Ellen to take the stage.
Hey, where is my folder? Are you holding it? Yeah. All right. Well, you know.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Alexa. Thank you, Marlene Kim. Thank you, Jennifer Gregg and Charlotte Nambi. And thank you to everybody for being here either virtually or in person. It's wonderful to be back in Boston, where the 9 to 5 movement began. And it's a special honor to celebrate May Day, International Workers' Day, with all of you. For more than 100 years, the 1st of May has been a day to mark the struggle for an 8-hour day and for workers' rights. And I'm going to talk to you today about how we in the 9 to 5 movement forged a new link in the chain of working women's activism that extends back into the past. I'll talk about what we did, what remains to be done, and some of the new links that are being forged today in that chain of activism. Then we're going to have time for questions and answers, and the Dignity at Work contest modeled on the Bad Boss contest that 9 to 5 used to run. So be sure to write down on your index card the worst thing a boss ever asked you to do. And does everybody have an index card? Is anybody missing one? Okay. And then we're going to vote by boo-ometer. So whoever gets the loudest boos gets an extra book to give to a friend or boss of your choice. All right, so now I'm going to start sharing my screen, but I can't figure out how to do that. Okay, share screen, blah, blah. Going to do, right. 50 years ago, if you can believe it. Hold on. Okay. Can I have some tech help here? Charlotte, where are you? To figure out how to get to the just the slide. And now we need the first slide from the slideshow from the beginning. It's under this thing. No, it's not there. You can go down to, whoops, to this. Next to there we go. Right. 50 years ago, on a cold December morning, 10 women office workers, including me, fanned out across downtown Boston to pass out the first issue of the 9 to 5 newsletter. And the front page said this: "We keep Boston's businesses and institutions running smoothly. Without us, they would grind to a halt. Yet we are underpaid and undervalued." And that's how my book begins, with the 10 of us shivering on street corners. I was 22 years old, that's me on the left, working as a clerk typist at Harvard. And I think it all hit home for us one day when a student walked into the office, looked one of us straight in the eye and asked, "Isn't anybody here?" "Well, I'm here. Can't you see me?" The 10 of us were concerned about low pay, unequal pay, training men to be our own supervisors, the lack of respect. As one woman said, "They call us girls until the day we retire without pension." We had felt that simply having the opportunity to work around world famous professors was just not enough. A slogan among office workers at Harvard became, "We can't eat prestige." I guess I also have to recount a story we heard about one time an office worker at MIT fell to the floor in a faint. And while she was lying on the floor, a renowned professor came out of his office, stepped over her body, got something out of a file drawer, and went back into his office without a word. At that time, when people thought worker, they pictured a man in a hard hat wielding a wrench. Women workers, especially office workers, were virtually invisible. But by the early 1970s, millions of women were pouring into the workforce, and 1 in 3 was an office worker. And as the clerical workforce grew by leaps and bounds, so did a sense of injustice among the women whose job it was to mimeograph and type and file and staple and photocopy. We wanted our rights and we wanted respect. We were keenly aware of the chain of working women's activism that stretched back to the bread and roses garment women of the turn of the 20th century, who went out on strike by the tens of thousands and galvanized the labor movement of their day, to the brave women who supported the sit-down strikers in the auto and steel industries in the 30s and 40s, and on up through the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, and the women's liberation movement, whose ideas had seeped into every corner of American society. We invited a professor to come and spell out for us just exactly how it had happened that office work, which was once a high-paying male job, had become an almost exclusively female job with low wages and little opportunity for advancement. And she explained to us that the so-called pink-collar ghetto we found ourselves in was a crystal clear example of occupational segregation, exactly like how the bread and roses garment women had been crowded into low-paying sweatshop jobs. And this professor told us office workers will continue to be confined to low-paying dead-end jobs as long as we remain quiet, as long as we settled for less. We were ready. We sensed that we had our finger on the pulse of something very powerful, and our dreams were huge. Our job was not just to get women out of the typing pool, but to make the typing pool a better place to work. As Elise Bryant, the director of the Coalition of Labor Union Women, says, there are no menial jobs, just menial pay. So maybe it was our turn to forge a link in the chain of working women's activism. Maybe we could change the modern office, change the labor movement, change the world. We thought big. But office workers were scared to take action, and rightfully so. In the downtown workforce, there was little or no history of collective action. When you had a problem, you were likely to think of it as your individual personal problem. Maybe you should dress better or take a class. For most office workers, the idea of sitting across a table with management and negotiating over working conditions was unimaginable. And of course, employers were intent on keeping it that way. The working conditions were very authoritarian. You could not get up from your cubicle and go across the room to talk to someone else without your supervisor noticing. And when we handed out our leaflets outside the big skyscrapers, inside the revolving doors, there would be supervisors waiting to snatch the leaflets out of women's hands. So how are we going to get off the ground? Well, we got ourselves a tiny little office at the YWCA, and we got to work calling up all the women who had written us in response to the newsletter and inviting them to lunch one by one. Sometimes I ate 3 lunches in one day. And that's how I learned a very important principle of organizing, which is never bring an artichoke to a recruitment lunch. The heart of every lunch was listening to what our lunch mates were concerned about, how they spoke, the words they used. Many women told us in no uncertain terms that they did not consider themselves feminists. So, okay, we could live with that. We didn't let vocabulary get in the way of solidarity. We created roles in our organization for all kinds of people, the bold, the shy, everybody in between. Some women were comfortable speaking in public. Other people, when it was time to go around the room and introduce yourselves, their hearts started pounding. So they were the ones who set up the chairs or brought the cookies or did research or brought their friends. And in November of 1973, we called our first public meeting and our organization took off. Our strategy, as it emerged, had 3 prongs. First, we worked like crazy to get into the media. We took over National Secretary's Day, the 3rd Wednesday in April, and made it a day of raises, not roses. We held bad boss contests, and the TV cameras rolled as we confronted the boss who asked his secretary to sew up a hole in his trousers while he was wearing them, and the one who fired his secretary for bringing him a corned beef sandwich on white bread instead of rye. We called out the boss, who handed his secretary a suspicious looking package and said, "This might be a letter bomb." And you know his next words? "You open it." Exactly. So don't forget to be working on your bad boss stories. The expression sexual harassment had not yet been coined, but that didn't mean it wasn't happening. And our view was that sexual harassment was an emblem of women's lack of power on the job. The more women join together for dignity and equality at the workplace, the less sexual harassment will take place. And the guidelines we created for employers, for women workers, and for their male co-workers helped pave the way for the Me Too movement. So media attention was prong number one, public embarrassment. The second prong was government action. We showed up en masse in the offices of the anti-discrimination enforcers and demanded that they use their powers to the max, do their job. And many did. I don't know if any of you remember the name Jim Stone, Dukakis's insurance commissioner. Does anybody remember the name Mike Dukakis? Massachusetts governor in the 70s, later ran for president. So Jim Stone was about 26 years old when he got the job as insurance commissioner. Rumor had it he cut his hair 5 inches the day he got the job, and he looked like a little kid in a suit. We stormed into his office and demanded that he take action against insurance companies that were discriminating against women and people of color. And he said, okay, and he did. So media, government action. The third prong, I think you could call whistleblowers, coming up with safe ways for women to take action anonymously. And I'll tell you a little more about that later. It all came together. Basically, we perfected the art of raising a ruckus all over town. You could not avoid us. So a group of people who had been unseen and unlistened to started demanding the recognition we deserved. And I think the way some bosses saw it was that the wallpaper had come alive and things began to change. Countless bosses began to make their own coffee. We heard about a group of women in a tiny insurance company who drew up a long list of demands, including a raise, and started circulating a petition. And after 3 days, their boss caught them at it. And he held up the petition over the trash can and he said, "Do you know what we do with these things? They go right in the trash." Plunk. 3 days later, all their demands were met. Soon we were taking on the biggest and the baddest corporate titans and driving them mad. We took on the biggest bank in town, the First National Bank of Boston, and declared 1979 the year of the first. And here's where the third prong, whistleblowers, came in. We set up an anonymous hotline just for employees of the First National Bank. And on the first day of our campaign, we stood outside the bank handing out a survey, anonymous survey, asking people to tell us what it was like to work there. So it was all safe. It was all anonymous. The bank immediately announced they were instituting job posting, our first demand, first victory at the first. And by the end of the year of the first, we had won promotions, career ladders, a grievance procedure, and the biggest raise in bank history. We announced our next target, the biggest insurance company, the John Hancock. And that night, one particular executive decided he'd better spend all night in his office, just in case what? I don't know, in case we invaded, I suppose. We did not invade, but it wasn't long before the company handed out a huge raise. And for the first time ever, they allocated $100,000 for employee childcare. Across the city, we were winning millions of dollars in back pay and raises for women and people of color. And I can't tell you how exciting it was. It was really exciting. As the historian Lane Wyndham says, they created their own form of feminism, a workplace feminism, and it was powerful. Women all over the country had the same problems and the same dreams. So we went national with members in every state and chapters in dozens of cities. We made a point of targeting cities with diverse workforces in order to build a multiracial organization. Baltimore, Cleveland, Atlanta. We placed a priority on building a diverse membership, leadership, and staff that would reflect the makeup of the clerical workforce itself. And that's something that didn't just happen. It took conscious work, and it's something I'm very proud of. Jane Fonda came to us and said she wanted to make a movie about the concerns of office workers. Needless to say, we were thrilled. She brought her team to meet with our members, and they popped a question that we had never thought to ask in all those recruitment lunches, which was, have you ever fantasized about doing in your boss? There was a moment of stunned silence, and then the room just exploded because it turned out everybody had. And all those fantasies went right into the script. In the movie, 3 women get together, and as things develop, it becomes necessary to kidnap and tie up their boss, who the New York Times film critic described as a fine lunatic villain, a mini-brained tomcat. Once he's gone, nobody really notices. And the 3 women bring in all kinds of worker-friendly policies like flex time and job sharing and on-site childcare center. And come to find out, with these new worker-friendly policies, the company actually runs better than it ever has before. So women office workers had never seen ourselves as the main characters on the big screen. And the atmosphere in the theaters was electric. There's one scene where Jane Fonda, is like her first day of work. She's ushered into a little room with a huge photocopying machine. And she, timidly presses the button and all these papers start flying out of different orifices and her lip starts to tremble. And women would stand up in the theaters and yell, push the stop button. So the movie was a huge box office success in 1980. And Dolly Parton's toe-tapping anthem, which you just heard, Working 9 to 5, said it all. So it was our movement that inspired the movie. And the movie in turn gave our movement a huge boost after debate. And now it was time to consolidate our power. And that meant a union. Over the past several years, we had used our 3-pronged strategy, media, government enforcement, whistleblowing, to make big changes for working women. And our style of workplace feminism was powerful. It enabled us to win some of the kinds of victories that unions win. But remember, we were not a union. And we knew that only through a union contract do you get it in writing, guaranteed. Workers in unions earn higher pay, they have better benefits, and a say over working conditions. So we'd already laid the groundwork here in Boston through our local 925. The confusion was deliberate. And in 1981, the Service Employees International Union granted us a nationwide charter, and we got busy from coast to coast. We had 5 organizers for the entire country. It was a little insane, but we brought thousands of women into the labor movement. And one of them was Carol Sims in Cleveland. And I'm going to show you a couple of minutes from the documentary called 9 to 5, The Story of a Movement, which is on Netflix now. And if you haven't seen it, you should really check it out. Now here's Carol. Let me see if I can. Help. Oh, here we go. Okay.
I worked at the corporate office, which I always called it the big house, because that's where all the bosses, the president of the college, the assistant, everybody was there. You could not talk about the union at all. That was a no-no. 9 to 5. Had a demonstration right outside. All my team of workers, they were all looking out the window like, management was listening, trying to see where everybody was at. Management would fire you. I had to figure out whether I was gonna go out or stay in. I watched people get mistreated in that office and belittled, and so I just felt like I'm not gonna just sit this out. I just decided this is something I have to do. And when I came back, I felt like I was Norma Ray. They were like, hey, all right, but they were doing it like in the corner in the bathroom, or they'll come by my desk like, all right. take care of. Like, all right. So from that day on, I had a real interest in change. I became an organizer.
Not just SEIU, but many other unions invested new resources in organizing women workers. And they discovered that union drives in woman-dominated workplaces, especially those with a high percentage of Black women, were more likely to succeed. And that was a surprise to those who early on told us, forget it, women can't be organized. They could be, and they were. In 1988, the Harvard office workers won their union with AFSCME, and it took 15 years with Harvard pushing back at every turn. Back in the early 70s, a reporter asked Harvard's personnel director why the university was so opposed to meeting the demands of office workers, and he waxed poetic. He said, Harvard is like an oyster. It is continually pelted with little irritants, like tiny grains of sand. Eventually, that which irritates it becomes pearls, but you must wait a while. Well, those irritants did become pearls. The Harvard office workers did win their union, and Harvard is a better place to work today. Just like every union in the 80s and beyond, we encountered ferocious opposition. Clerical employers tried every trick in the book, legal and illegal. Firings, captive audience meetings, moving out of town, intimidation. And in response, we were forced to come up with pretty clever tactics of our own. At the University of Washington in Seattle, what turned out to work was making Tampax machines a major issue at the bargaining table. Yes, we did want more Tampax machines at the worksite, but the real reason we kept talking about Tampax was that every time we used the word Tampax, the management negotiators got so flustered that some of them had to leave the room. And we won a great contract. So what did we achieve and what remains to be done? Issues that used to be considered individual matters are now matters of policy, corporate policy, union policy, government policy. Pregnancy discrimination is illegal today. Sexual harassment is illegal. We have the Family and Medical Leave Act. We don't have help wanted male and help wanted female ads in the newspapers anymore. Managerial jobs are now increasingly open to college-educated women. And within the labor, to the top, including Liz Schuler, the first woman president of the AFL-CIO, and many, many more. But as we know, it can be harder to be a worker in today's economy than it was 50 years ago. Low-paying dead-end jobs are still with us, and women and people of color are most likely to remain stuck in them. The gig economy means that some people are working 2 and 3 jobs just to put food on the table. Fewer people have benefits, pensions, paid vacation, paid sick time, regular schedules than did back in the early 70s. Computerized monitoring and a relentless pace of work make many workers miserable. The good news is that support for unions is at its highest level in 2 generations. 71% of Americans support unions today. And as you know, a new wave of labor organizing is in full swing. We're hearing new voices, seeing new tactics, the barbecues run by the Amazon workers, the sip-ins at Starbucks, and all the Starbucks organizing that's making headlines across the country, including here in Boston. Coworker.org, One Fair Wage for Tipped Workers, the National Domestic Workers Alliance. 9 to 5 is still reaching out to women in every state, and Local 925 is going strong in Washington state. These are the people who are forging today's links in the chain of worker activism. So in conclusion, today, I'm savoring my memories of the first stirrings of activism among women workers in Boston half a century ago. I'm celebrating the brave souls who are organizing today, and I'm dreaming of victories to come. While I was doing the research for my book, I opened up a box of old papers and I found a little quote that I'd clipped out of a magazine and I used to keep on my desk. And it said, "Through our great good fortune, in our youth, we were touched with fire. And that's what it was like for me and so many of us in the working women's movement. I have to say that I do have hope for the future. My message to all those striving for fair treatment and a better world is learn from the past, read my book, learn from the 9-to-5 stories, draw inspiration from what we did, but then go on to forge your own path. So now I'd like you to hand in your index cards. And our two judges here maybe are going to choose 4 finalists. First, I'm going to read out all the cards. Then we're going to pick the 4. They're going to pick the 4 best. And then we will vote. Well, we want something to happen at the workplace, right? Great. Okay, get those cards up here. Judge, please bring your cards to the front. I'm going to read them up first, and then you can choose your best 4. So you're going to be think about which ones are going to. Any more cards? Okay. All right, we have a little pack here. I noticed that not everybody has filled one out, but that's okay. All right, thank you. All right. Quote from the boss. Just shut the up and get us the money, said my boss at the United Nations at the top of his voice. All right. The boss requested me to leave work and pick up something from them at the store, pressuring me to be a team player and make the sacrifice to give up my 30-minute break in a 10-hour day for a meeting because he would do the same. As Santa Claus for an entire 10-hour shift. Back in 2016, my dad passed away just before the spring term. In a staff meeting, the then chair of my department stated in front of everyone that he found it really inconvenient that I could and wanted me to come back early from bereavement leave. Job interview in 2009, the vice president of a university asked me to convince him why he should hire a C's woman, that's the zodiac sign, because we're known to be wishy-washy and disobedient. A senior faculty member and search chair at another university demanded to, not this one, meaning not you, Mass Boston, demanded to know why I couldn't be at a search dinner on a Sunday night, adding that he could report this as a contract violation. Okay, my boss said, starting tomorrow, you don't need to come to work. You are fired. All right. So the 2 judges are going to, they're not many more than 4, but they're going to pick the top 4, and then we're going to vote by boo. You have another one? Oh, questions online. Okay. We're going to harvest the ones from the people who are online. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay. This is one. Okay, it's classified workers in public universities are still experiencing inequity in benefits. Okay, that's a good one. Okay.
No, I think that's it. Yeah. Just this one.
Okay, so that's that last one. Okay, good. All right, you have 1 minute.
1 minute to figure out top 40 then.
Yes. You guys come up here and be transparent.
Grabbing our glass. That's-
And then we'll have time for questions and comments. Okay.
Okay. Everyone's is terrible. Nobody feel bad.
Yes, exactly.
Remember, you're fired. Okay. That. Yes, for sure, that was terrible. That's terrible. Yes, that was terrible.
No, so bad.
Two, okay. Yeah, this, yeah.
And one more.
Yeah, one of those two, yeah.
Can you do 5?
There we go.
Okay. Ready?
Oh, no.
Okay, so your job is to, I'm just gonna read each one, and as I do, boo either loudly or soft. Okay. All right. Why should I hire a Pisces woman as a professor? We are known to be wishy-washy and disobedient. Pressured me to be a team player and sacrifice my 30-minute break in a 10-hour day. Okay. My dad passed away and the boss said he found it inconvenient that I was still out and wanted me to come back early. Okay, and the last one, dress as Santa Claus for an entire 10-hour shift. So I think it's the bereavement woman, bereaved person. You are welcome to take an extra book, whoever you are, and give it to the friend or boss of your choice. Now I would welcome your questions and comments, and then there's some really good food over here, I noticed. So
Any questions?
this is a light,
That's a lot.
this is a mic.
Any questions from anyone? I guess there's some there. No. I'll start it. I mean, I've been reading the book. I'm not done yet, but it seemed like the book, you became yourself from organizing, which is very typical of organizers. You know, you felt your power, you learned who you were as an organizer. I know that's very typical for women, a lot of ethnic and minorities and racial minorities. So is that true? And yeah.
Yeah, that's a really great comment. And when I thought about writing this book, I really wanted to tell my personal story as well as the larger picture. And it's really true that I started out, I was 22 years old, and I grew up in 9 to 5. And a point that I want to make is that through our organization, women gained a sense of their power and then took that back to the workplace. So people ask, well, how did you do it? How do you get people to be ready to do more? Part of it was just being part of our organization and getting up at a podium. We had lots of practice sessions. We told people, if you're afraid you're going to throw up at the podium, bring a small wastebasket with you. We egged each other on, and being part of this just really vibrant, passionate team was so important in helping all of us to reach more of our potential. So thanks for that. It's great.
My second question is, what did you learn? You know, doing the organizing and that you can impart with people here from your organizing, from your writing, and these are professors who are facing some pretty bad stuff. What kind of advice do you have? Because I know you had your low moments too.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you can't really sum it up in one sentence, of course, but every day was a learning experience. And just listening to how, for example, when we started organizing, we would stand at the top of the T stairs and shove a newspaper into the midriff of everybody coming up. And we would have our opinions about, well, that woman, I bet she'll be for us, and that one won't be, and this and that. We were wrong very often. For example, we thought women who were not well dressed would probably be the most interested in our organization. That was completely 180 degrees wrong. People who really cared about their jobs and how they were doing on their jobs and doing the very best job, they were the ones who wanted to join 9 to 5. Older women often were very interested and had been waiting for this kind of thing to come around, you know, so we had to let go of a lot of assumptions. And that's something that I remind myself of many times, several times a week. You know, I wrote it in the book, you know, let go of your assumptions and have an open mind. And that remains true to this day. And we sort of, one of the metaphors I use in the book is rather than be a motorboat, just going straight as an organizer, head for the goal, be a sailboat. Sense the wind and see what people are willing to do and what they're ready to do and learn from other people. So, you know, the book is full of like very concrete organizing advice sort of slipped in among the dramatic stories. But the main thing is, you know, we were 22 years old. We didn't know what we were doing. We figured it out, and other people are going to figure it out from here on out.
At the end of the semester, and I came here in bad mood.
Good. That was my point.
One of the unintended of women's organizing is that, and this might be a wrong exercise for you, so I'm genuinely interested, that women have more in common in the early consciousness raising of the late 60s, early 70s, because you were vulnerable. If your husband left you, even if you were wealthy, you were incredibly vulnerable, or if you were poor, you were also more vulnerable. So the consciousness raising was more, there was more class diversity within the consciousness raising. And then benefits came in, real things were won. That introduced new divides in terms of about when they say, hey, you know, what are the top 3 issues facing the nation? Poverty fell out as something that always felt vulnerable. So you saw that in your movement, and if you were able to counter it, how so? So we can do the same.
Wow. Okay. The first thing that came to my mind is something that an organizer of clerical workers said, which was management is going to offer promotions to some people. Take the promotion and keep on organizing. So the clerical workforce, the office workforce, was very interesting in the early 70s because there were people in office jobs, I was one of them, with college education. And the view of a lot of these people was, wait a minute, why can't I move up? Am I expected to just be 10 typing fingers forever for the rest of my career? It looks that way. Other people maybe came out of the high schools in Boston because the white high schools would allow the John Hancock Insurance Company, Liberty Mutual, to go into the high schools and recruit young girls. So when the day they graduated, the next day they were sitting behind a typewriter in the insurance companies. And for some of those people, an office job seemed like a real step up. And no one in their family had a job other than a factory job. And so here was a nice clean job. You dressed up, you were, you know, consorting with bosses wearing suits. You know, it was like a completely different thing. And then dawned on people that those jobs paid less than factory jobs. And so it was a very, very interesting mix of classes. And so we had a lot of it, which was just a really rich mix, you know, and we had, as organizers, worked very hard to make sure that our organization was a place that felt comfortable to people from all different classes. And this was something that I think some people who hadn't seen themselves as in the women's movement, they came to 9 to 5 and they felt at home. So I don't know, I don't really subscribe to this thing that as things get better, it means that things get worse. You know, you have to figure out that next problem. You can't just say, well, gee, maybe it would have been better if we hadn't won that. No, it's all incremental. It all contributes. And But it's a very interesting point, and I revere Barbara Ehrenreich, so.
So I wrote my file, as the attorney.
Joanne,
Yes.
thank you for coming.
And I had some time when I that. What I remember so vividly, so importantly, is that Ellen and Karen and Marie and the other organizers, because they hadn't been in organizers before, they had no inhibition about. And that really made a difference, that they were willing to do things that hadn't been done. The prime example that comes to my mind is that up until 9 to 5, clerical and other staff of law firms were not allowed to organize under the national regulations. And they decided they were challenged. So they found 3 people out of 200 people at the law firm in Boston and formed Michael Final Clerk, Messenger, and one very new one. And pursued the case all the way to the National Labor Relations Board in DC. And every time one of us would say, feeling that if anything could go as long as it was legal. And that time, it definitely tried. I think that's a good lesson for organizing today, that you can't just fix the trial and true because it doesn't, they were outsmarted you in that. So the more creative and unique you can present when you're organizing, makes a huge difference.
That's really great. Thank you for that. Was that just the lesson? We didn't know what wouldn't work, so we just tried it, and we tried the next thing and the next thing, and yeah.
Here's a question for you.
Question. Do you have any advice for women who are adjuncts or otherwise precariously employed in academia today? Join together. Come together. Don't try to go it alone. You will be stronger. We used to have a leaflet that said, individuals can make a difference. Individuals working together make a bigger difference. So that's my advice. There is a lot of organizing among adjuncts today. In fact, I think the UAW, the auto workers, is something like 20% university staff at this point. And so there's a lot has been done already on other campuses. There's a lot of wisdom out there about how to go about it.
They're organized here.
They are organized here. Okay,
Yes.
great.
Get involved in the union.
Right.
Any other questions?
Yes.
When I first saw that the title is 9 to 5, I thought about how the 9 to 5 based on a male hormone cycle. So they have like a 24-hour hormone cycle, and the like 9 to 5 they align to that, whereas females have 28 days. And so it's like less
That is new information for me. Thank you for that. Wow. So 9 to 5, I mean, 9 to 5 is sort of a thing of the past for a lot of today's workers anyway, you know, whether it's remote work or whether it's 3 jobs or whatever. And we were talking earlier today, Marlene and I, about how the 8-hour day, it took a real fight and people died for the 8-hour day. It used to be 10 hours, it used to be 12 hours, and it was, there were no weekends, you know. So maybe this is an issue for the future, is making sure that the work days line up with people's hormonal needs. Go for it.
And International Workers' Day is because of the Haymarket riots in Chicago. They were marching and there was a general national strike across the nation for the 8-hour day. They were working 10 at that time. So that's why it's May Day, which is unknown in this country, not even celebrated in this country. But it's from that tragedy in Chicago. So.
Other questions,
other
comments?
questions?
Okay, well, thank you. I'm happy to inscribe books personally to people and help yourself to this wonderful food. And thank you for being just a really wonderful audience. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Joanne and Ellen, for your wonderful work. Thanks for coming today. I actually wanted to answer Erin because I understand the argument, but think what's going on today, and women think they're more, splintered, and in some ways we are. But then now there's this bodily autonomy issue that can unite all women again, which is a good one. So thank you for coming. And help yourself to food, get your books personalized, and we'll see you again. Thank you.